Okay, so this video is quite personal, but I think it has to be said. I've touched on this before, and I remember one of the comments on that particular video was, Nathan, why don't you talk more about this stuff? And the reason I usually don't is because, I cover a wide range of subjects, and most of them don't directly involve me, other than that I'm interested in them as topical subjects. Although I will occasionally put personal references in there. But this one is particularly personal. And I want to just put an important disclaimer. I don't want anyone to worry about me. I'm not going to do anything drastic. But basically, I want to talk about the issue of suicide, depression, and particularly how that impacts men. Mental health issues impact a wide range of people, men and women, young and old, from all racial backgrounds. It's something that we've got more awareness of, I think, in recent years, and that's a good thing. I mean, it's good that there's more awareness that people do suffer mental health issues, and mental health issues is a huge field. I mean, it's a very, very umbrella term, and I don't want to get into like I'm not a psychologist. I don't want to get into the nuances of every mental health condition, but depression is definitely a mental health issue, and it's something that I've experienced throughout my life. Not consistently. It's not like I'm constantly depressed, and I think there is that image of depression is kind of people with their head in their hands. That famous Van Gogh painting, with their head in their hands and just being miserable, and that isn't what depression is about. It's about it's not exactly the same for every person. The exact circumstance, exact depth of the depression, um, and also what it isn't is a consistent thing. Well, it might be for some people, but in my experience, I mean, my own experience, and from what I've seen, people who do suffer clinical depression, it's not like they're constantly miserable. There will be times when they're quite happy. And there's a whole range of medical diagnoses involved in that, like mania, um, bipolar disorder. There's all sorts of things. Like I said, I'm not going to venture into that because I'm not qualified to talk in detail about those things. Um, but I think that's true. I think it's one reason it is hard to notice, hard to spot, and I think mental health issues in general are hard to spot is because they're mental. Someone can be physically strong, have two arms and two legs. This is why I feel so strongly about the Department of Work and Pensions and the work capability assessments. And I don't want to derail from this video, but they basically take the view if you've two arms and two legs, you can work. And anyone who agrees with that, frankly, is ignorant about how mental health can impact people. And I'm not saying that to be polarizing, I'm saying it because it's part of this subject. And it needs to be said, mental health issues can be crippling, they really can. But particularly in how it relates to men, I'm a man and I've been through depression. And yes, I will say there has been times I have come pretty damn close to the edge. I'm just going to say it, most recently, 2016, just 3 years ago. Things just were not going right in my life. And I cannot say things are going that great right now either, but that time I really was. And I'll open up here, it'll be quite personal because I think if people know the context, it helps to kind of spread awareness. Everyone's different, but in my case, late 2015, things just weren't going right. I had broken up with my girlfriend at that time, or rather, she had to leave due to circumstances that were beyond our control. I cared for her deeply, and I still miss her a lot. That got to me badly, but it was something that was, and it wasn't the case that we could keep up touch online. That wasn't an option. Just, well, she basically moved on. She married someone else. So, what am I going to do? The ex boyfriend trying to contact a married woman, it's a no no. So that really got to me. My pet dog died, the family dog, who'd been with us for years. That wasn't easy. My bike was stolen. Um, the job that I was doing, a job I really enjoyed, I discovered that was my local university. I was working as a teaching assistant, and the department just wasn't taking anyone on. So basically, I was having a string of bad news, and it was all, and that mixed with financial anxieties because I was out of work at that time. It led to a situation in early 2016 where I thought, well, actually, it wasn't early 2016. I was unhappy for most of 2016. This was August 2016. So I'd had that backdrop and I was unhappy for most of that year. I'd done voluntary work, I'd done some paid jobs, but I was very unhappy and things came to a head and I wasn't thinking clearly and I remember getting a knife and I thought I'd kind of had this idea in my head that I just can't take this anymore. It's over. That's it. I've looked at what I could do. I've looked at the advice people gave about holding on. I'd phoned the Samaritans many times, and that was helpful insofar as it was good to have someone listening who was sympathetic and wasn't judging. But that was only ever temporary. Also, like a lot of charities in the UK, they've had funding problems, and there's some approaches have changed with the Samaritans. They have this thing which I think is a bit absurd, where they won't phone you unless you specifically ask them to, and they're a bit pedantic about that. I totally understand the reason they have to be. They want to be careful there, but I would try to explain to them I had little credit on my phone, and they would sometimes not be that helpful. I don't want to bash people working for Smartens, they're good people, but that was just a little criticism I had, and it put me off phoning them. Also, that was always ever a temporary fix. It wasn't, and they can't give advice either. That's another thing with Samaritans. They can't give you any advice. Not that I was necessarily looking for advice, but that's so. Anyway, all these things were coming together. My family, the friends that I had were would have been sympathetic, but I just didn't know how to put it into words how I was feeling. It's not that, and this I think is another misconception. People think that people who take their own lives or are very depressed, they don't have people they can talk to. I don't think it's necessarily that. It's that they themselves feel that they can't open up. I would say the majority of people who take their own lives in this country do have family, do have friends, and that's a tragic thing. I mean, I think suicide, from a moral perspective, is I'm not talking necessarily religious perspectives here. I mean, all the major religions are against it as an idea, but I think it's very selfish. I mean, the thing that actually that was what stopped me doing it. Ultimately, I didn't want to put my parents through that. I didn't want them to go through that experience of losing their son at, as I then was 30, 26, yeah, yeah, a month short of my 31st birthday. So a big focus on mental health issues has been trying to encourage people to open up and speak about the problems, and I totally back that. I think it's a good thing. And I think that with men, there's two things. Firstly, men put enormous stigma on themselves and on other men that if a man speaks about his problems, it's somehow a weakness. I've had a few female friends who were less than helpful, let's put it that way. And the only reason I'm mentioning the gender issue is because it's all to do with the idea of a man should not show his emotions. And I mentioned a lot of men are hard in that sense on other men, but in my experience, also some women. Some of my female friends, when I sort of, well, I put it this way: I think unfortunately there are people out there when you open up, they'll use it against you, and they'll do it in a very subtle way, but that was one factor that made me reluctant to open up after a while because I had opened up and people were, I'm not saying they were nasty, they were openly nasty. I don't want to give that impression, but they responded in a somewhat judgmental way and it didn't I felt really let down. I felt this person's supposed to be my friend and that's how they're responding and it got to me badly. Now I'm well aware that there are people out there who are compassionate, they do just listen and they're sympathetic. People often say, "Oh, I don't want sympathy," but a bit of sympathy. I don't know why we put a taboo around it. It's not a bad thing. Sometimes people just do need a bit of sympathy and a bit of like, I'm in your corner. I'm not judging you. I understand this. I've been through that. One thing that you see at that time, I also posted a message on Facebook. Was it a cry for help? I don't know if it was because I genuinely did think I was going to do something. And I saw that more as a last message as opposed to a cry for help. What actually happened was, I think my brother saw it and some other friends and acquaintances saw it and they were concerned. I think my brother phoned my parents. Some friends were also sending all these messages like, "Oh, Nathan, talk to us," and a lot of people cared. I would say over 100 people responded to that. And my feelings about that were one of gratitude, also embarrassment. Like, kind of, oh, I've made this big fuss over something, but it wasn't an attention seeking thing. I really did think I was going to go through with it. And what happened was my mum came up and the knife was on my bed and it was like a kitchen knife. I'd kind of had this idea that cutting myself, and I don't mean like self harming, I mean cutting myself for blood loss to actually die, to put it bluntly. I had this idea that that would be, well, okay, if I'm going to do it, I want it to be as as painless as possible. The idea of poisoning myself, and I don't want to be morbid here, but that wasn't an option for me because I understand that's very painful, and I didn't want to keep going through the mentality that the depression that I was going through. So I did feel like I wanted out of it. But here's the question about suicide: is it that you want to die? Or is it that you just want out of that frame of mind and you want out of that particular life circumstance that you're in? That's the question people need to ask themselves. I think there's a few things. If you're on the verge, if you have suicidal thoughts, you have to keep questioning yourself. You have to say, is this is this going to put me into a better frame of mind or is it simply going to end everything? It's going to end everything. And if you are religious, well, there's then the theocratic issue of killing yourself is it's killing, well, you go to heaven and don't want to get interject religion too much in this, but I think that, I mean, suicide is the leading cause of death for men aged between 18 and 45 in this country. Not knife crime, not road accidents, suicide. That's staggering. I mean, suicide kills far more people than homicides. I believe it's about double the rate, and that's true in almost every country. In terms of the gender balance, more men commit suicide, although more women apparently make attempts at it. So there is a discrepancy, but that, women also go through depression. I've got a good American friend, and I know she's struggled with depression. So I don't care who someone is, I don't care what their background is, I don't care. The point about depression is it can affect absolutely anybody. And depression is not just feeling a bit stressed out, a bit down. It's when things get to the point where you really do feel that you can't go through it anymore. And it's scary. It's not it's not the outcome that's necessarily scary, but what scares me is that things have got so bad that I'm seriously considering this. That's terrifying. And I've been there a few times. Clearly I've never went through with it. And what stopped me? Care from my parents, love from my parents. I didn't want to put them through that. Now, some other people may feel that they don't have support from relatives, and that's really sad. But what I would say to those people is do not have friends. Maybe if you don't have close friends, there must be someone in your life that cares, maybe more than you think. And the intention of this video is not to offer advice, but hopefully by just sharing my experience, my thoughts, people can relate to it. No two people are exactly the same. So what I've been through won't be exactly the same as what someone else is going through or been through. My parents have been fantastic. But the fact that I have loving parents doesn't mean that it's less of a challenge. It does mean that I know they care about me. But depression is not something that can just be like, oh well, listen to some nice music, or it's. I think it's good that mental health is becoming more on has come more to the fore in this country. I'll give the Liberal Democrats the credit; they were one of the first major parties to really make this an issue, and that's now become a popular thing. But no one should ever, as human beings, we're judgmental. I think that's part of human nature. And I'm going to continue making videos and pontificating and opinionating. But one thing I will never do is use someone's depression against them. I may not like them, I may criticize their views or their behavior or any other thing, but I will never use depression against someone because I know what that is like. I know how crippling it can be. So I think as men, we need to drop this thing of giving other men a hard time for being open about their emotions. I do think you can be too emotional. I think you can, obviously there's times you have to be subtle, there's times that you have to, but the general idea of opening up shouldn't be a stigma. And this kind of laddish culture of, oh, we'll have banter, we'll have get the drinks and lads, and then I think it's just like a plaster. It doesn't cover unless you're sitting down and really talking about issues. Then, and it isn't easy. I mean, no one goes to a pub with their mates and says, "Let's talk about depression." It's just not the done thing. They'll talk about football. They'll talk about boxing. They'll talk about um, what's happening at work. They'll talk about having a row with the wife. It's but very rarely will people go into details, and that's understandable. People go to a pub or another social venue for downtime, but someone could be smiling, but there could be something going on there, and I think it's also about just recognizing ourselves that if people judge you, if you've opened up to someone and they judge you, that's incredibly hurtful and it's frustrating. But that is their fault. If you look down on someone because they've opened up to you, that's or if you use it against them, you might not realize you're doing it. But if someone wants to open up and you get into this thing about, oh, you need to do this, you need to do that. I think the best thing in that circumstance, people need to understand this. Just listen to them. Listen to what they are saying. I think some people try to give advice and they mean well, but advice that isn't asked for doesn't come across as good intentions. It comes across as controlling. So if I do give advice, it's always with a caveat like, I hope you don't mind me saying this, or if you don't mind me giving this suggestion. That's how I try to approach it. I'm never like, oh, you should do this, you should do that. I think some people do have good intentions, they just don't realize how they sound. Anyway, this hasn't been an easy video. I've been very open here, and the last time I made a video like this, there were good responses. Some people might troll, and I don't give a shit about that, but I don't want anyone to think that I'm in any imminent danger or anything like that. I just want, hopefully, by expressing my experience, people can just recognize that depression isn't abnormal. It's not something that should be normalized in the sense that it shouldn't be, we need to deal with it, but it shouldn't be seen as abnormal either. Thanks for watching.